This is the moment Joe Biden waited for more than 30 years, about to walk up onto that stage to accept his party's nomination for president.
I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I'll be an ally of the light, not the darkness.
His moment arriving amid a pandemic, an economic collapse, and a long overdue call for racial justice in this country. And as he looked out to the fireworks in the sky, his smile covered by his mask. Sharing the stage, his historic choice, his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris. Less than 24 hours later, both of them sitting down with us, wearing masks as they arrived, all of us sitting well more than 6 feet apart. Well, thank you both for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, as you know, it was more than 30 years ago you first ran for president, 1987. It's now 2020, and you're the candidate of change. I wonder, after dreaming of that moment for more than 3 decades, what it was like.
Well, you know, we talked about this a little bit. I have an overwhelming sense of obligation. I mean, whoever wins this election is going to determine the fate of this country for at least a couple decades. And there's a lot at stake. The character of the country is on the ballot. There's so much at stake.
And Senator Harris, you've already made history by just being on this ticket. But something you said before you were even chosen, you said, I want him to choose whoever he believes can help him win. You said, it sounds pretty cold-blooded, but that's where I am.
That is correct.
So you're the pick. How are you best suited to help Vice President Biden win?
When I think about Joe's life, I think about his career, coupled with my experiences in my career. I think that between us, we have the ability to really meet the American people where they are and address their fears and their hopes and their dreams.
We have so much we want to get to here, but I do want to get right to the heaviness of the moment in our country. The pandemic, more than 170,000 American lives lost now. And Mr. Vice President, you have said that people are dying because of this negligence. Do you blame President Trump for lives lost?
I don't blame him for the COVID crisis. I blame him for walking away and not dealing with the solutions. And the idea of saying that this is going to go away, this miracle is going to happen, there's all talk about the crazy things about bleach and using, I mean, it's just, he hasn't listened to the scientists.
But do you think the negligence on the part of this administration has cost lives?
I can tell you what Columbia University Medical School said. It said that he acted just 1 week earlier, he would have saved over 37,000 lives. 2 weeks earlier, over 50,000 people. This is about telling the American people the truth, letting the scientists speak, listening to the science, and stepping out of the way.
You said in your speech last night that you want to implement a national strategy. And as part of that strategy, you said, we'll have a national mandate to wear masks. You know a lot of governors aren't going to go along with that. And what do you say to Americans who say, this is my freedom, my choice whether to wear a mask? Are you going to force them to wear a mask?
This isn't about freedom. It's about freedom for your neighbors. It's about a patriotic responsibility to protect your neighbors. And the only way you can do that is to be socially distanced and wearing a mask when you're in public, when you're outside. The first time I've ever heard people say that doing something patriotic that can save other people's lives and impacts on their freedom. Come on, give me a break. It's about saving lives.
You talk about the science. If you're sworn in come January, and we have coronavirus and the flu combining, which many scientists have said is a real possibility, would you be prepared to shut this country down again?
I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives, because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. That is the fundamental flaw of this administration's thinking to begin with. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. You have to deal with the virus.
So if the scientists say, shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists.
And Senator Harris, we have seen the disproportionate toll on communities of color all across this nation during this pandemic. The president talks about the potential of a vaccine almost daily. We have seen what's happened with testing in this country, the lines, waiting days, weeks for results. If and when there is a vaccine, under your administration, who would get that vaccine first?
Well, that's a great point, because let's also be clear that creating a vaccine and finally having a vaccine is a very different point than people actually being vaccinated. And there needs to be a plan. And that's one of the things that Joe and I talk about, which is the plan to ensure that we're going to have all of the equipment in place to actually administer a vaccine to the largest number of people as quickly as possible, keeping in mind that there are disparities, there are different needs based on different communities, and that's why we talk about the need to track actually racial disparities, disparities based on region and geographic region, and do that now, so that when we have a vaccine, those communities that are most in need will get them.
I've been pleading with the president for the last 3 months. You need a plan. I suggested he take $25 billion now and put together a plan. How will you get to over 300 million Americans? He has no notion how to do that. There's somebody should be in charge now directing precisely how the vaccine will be distributed. How many vials are going to have to be, in fact, manufactured that hold the vaccine? How many shots are going to have to be required? How is he going to do it? It's about how. Plan now.
Be honest with the American people, though. If you're elected president, Mr. Vice President, where will we be? You've been meeting with your scientists. What does next winter look like? What does a year from now look like? Are we still in the middle of this pandemic?
It depends on what this president leaves me in 5 months. Everybody asks, which is a legitimate question, what are you going to do on January 21st, 2021? It depends on what he's left me with. And right now, it looks like what's going to happen is that the numbers are going to go up. There's estimates that well over 200,000 people will die. Significantly more people will be infected. It doesn't have to be that way. He can take action now.
We know there's another crisis attached to this pandemic, and that's the economy. 30 million Americans on unemployment right now. We just learned of another million last week filing for unemployment. You lead in the polls, but in the same polls, there's also a vulnerability. Over and over again, President Trump leads on the economy, and you know what he's saying. He said, President Biden, a Biden administration, will raise your taxes. Will you raise taxes?
I will raise taxes for anybody making over $400,000. Let me tell you why I'm going to do it. It's about time they start paying a fair share of the economic responsibility we have. The very wealthy should pay a fair share. Corporations should pay a fair share. The fact is, there are corporations making close to $1 trillion that pay no tax at all. I'm not punishing anybody. This is about everybody paying their fair share.
So no new taxes, $400,000 and down.
No new taxes. There would be no need for any.
And is it smart to tax businesses while you're trying to recover?
It's smart to tax businesses that, in fact, are making excessive amounts of money and paying no taxes.
But where is the cutoff? You talk about small businesses. Will you be raising taxes on small businesses in the recovery? You're talking about...
Look, you have 90% of the businesses out there are mom and pop businesses that are out there that employ less than 50 people. There'll be no raising taxes on them. We have to provide them with the ability to reopen. We have to provide more help for them, not less help.
I want to turn to the blistering attacks we've seen from President Trump just this week alone on your mental fitness, whether you're up for the job. His campaign has called you diminished, and I'm curious how you'd respond to that.
Watch me, Mr. President, watch me. Look at us both, what we say, what we do, what we control, what we know, what kind of shape we're in. Come on. Look, I think it's a legitimate question to ask anybody over 70 years old whether or not they're fit and whether they're ready. But only thing I can say to the American people, it's a legitimate question to ask anybody. Watch me.
Let's put the attacks aside then. The American people remember Ronald Reagan was 77 when he left office. You would be 78 entering office. And you have said yourself that you are a transition candidate. Does that mean a one-term president? What does that mean?
No, it doesn't mean.
So you're leaving open the possibility you'll serve 8 years if you get elected.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you both about a moment that people love to make a lot of. I have no interest in going back and looking at all the debates. Instead, though, I'd like to talk about the words on stage when the two of you were rivals. You remember that moment. Senator Harris, you were on stage talking about being a little girl who was being bussed. And you said of the vice president's words about working with segregationist senators that they were hurtful and personal.
And it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful. You also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
I think the American people want to know that these aren't debate moments, these aren't political points, that when you say they were hurtful and personal, you mean that. And so I'm curious what the vice president has said to you since then that made you think, okay, I'm okay with this, I can join this ticket.
What is hurtful to me is that black families own 1/10 of the wealth of white families. What is hurtful to me is that black and Latinos are twice as likely to die from COVID as white families. What is hurtful to me is that when you look at the disparities in everything from healthcare to education to the economic well-being of families in America, there are real racial disparities that are rooted in systemic racism and a failure to address the truths that may be difficult truths. Joe Biden does that, and he is doing that. He is addressing these truths. He speaks these truths.
Mr. Vice President, your wife, Jill Biden, had called it a punch to the gut that night, what she saw from Senator Harris. But now that months have passed, do you sense an understanding of where Senator Harris was coming from when she said personal and hurtful?
I sense exactly where she's coming from. And I think, look, I think a lot of people, and maybe even the senator at the time, didn't know the depth of my record. I'm also someone who is, we have the 8th largest black population in America, in this state. The reason I'm sitting here with you now is because African Americans vote over 90% for me. I don't take any for granted. I've worked like hell. And so, look, but we're on the same exact page about what the possibilities are right now. There's enormous possibilities.
And Senator Harris, now making history, the first black woman, the first Asian American on a presidential ticket for a major party. We asked her about the attacks, the words President Trump repeatedly uses to describe her. President Trump has referred to you as nasty, a sort of mad woman, a disaster, the meanest, most horrible, most disrespectful of anybody in the U.S. Senate. How do you define what you hear from the president?
Listen, I think that there is so much about what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth that is designed to distract the American people from what he is doing every day, that is about neglect, negligence, and harm to the American people.
And incompetence.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The idea that he would say something like that. No president has ever said anything like that. No president has ever used those words. And no president has said people coming out of fields with torches and spewing anti-Semitic bile and met by people who oppose them, and someone dies and he says they're good people on both sides. No president of the United States has ever said anything like that. Ever.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.